I'd just taken a tea up to her this morning, and she says, Graham, I think the world of you. I said, I think the world of you. She said, well, that's all right then. I said, what's brought all this on? She said, nothing. It's just, this tea's a bit strong. Pull the curtains. Of course I knew what had brought it on. She said, well, I wouldn't want you to think you're not number one. So I said, well, you're number one with me too. Give me your teeth and I'll swill them. What it was is we had a spot of excitement yesterday and bumped into a bit of Mother's past. I said to her, I didn't know you had a past. I thought I were your past. She said, you? I said, well, we go back a long way. Where does he fit in vis-a-vis Dad? Oh, he's pre-Dad, she said. Pre-Dad, I said. I'm surprised you can remember him. You can't remember to switch your blanket off. She said, oh, that's different. His name's Turnbull. I said, I know. He said, I parked her by the War Memorial on her usual seat. She waited while I went to get some reading matter. And then I waited while she went to spend a penny in the disabled toilet. She's not actually disabled. Her memory's bad. But she says she prefers their toilets because you get a bit more elbow room. She always takes forever, diddling her hands and whatnot. And when she eventually comes out, it turns out that she'd been talking to the attendant. I said, what about? She said, hanging. She's in favour of stronger offences, stronger penalties for minor offences. She said, I wish you'd have been there, love, because I told her we don't feel the same way, my Graham and me. You could have given her the statistics. The thing about Mum is, although she never had a proper education, she's picked up enough from me to be able to hold her own on all the subjects, up to the minute subjects like the environment and the colour problem. And for a woman of her age and background, she has a very liberal slant. She'll look at my guardian and actually thinks for herself. Dr. Chowdhury says, 4 marks, Graham. The best way to avoid a broken hip is to keep a flexible mind. Keep up the good work. They go mad round the War Memorial, so when we cross over, I generally slip my arm through hers until we're safely across. Only this time she postpones from letting go, because once upon a time we were stopped by one of those questionnaire women who reckons to take us for husband and wife. I mean, Mum's got white hair. She was doing this bit of a dodge, and I went, Mum, let go of my arm. I didn't really wrench it, but the next thing I know, she was flat on the pavement. I said, oh my God, Mother. People gathered round and I picked up her bag. She sits up and says, oh, I've landed both my stockings. I said, never mind your stockings, what about your pelvis? She says, it's these bifocals. They tell you not to look down. I was avoiding some sick. And then somebody says, that's a familiar voice. This little fella, bending over her, green trilby hat, shorty raincoat. Hello, he says. Remember me? Well, she doesn't remember people. I know that for a fact. Because she swore me down that she'd never met Joy Buckle, who teaches flowers in felt and fabric at Medea Centre. I said, you do know Joy. You knitted her a tea cosy. That's all she can knit. Tea cosies and bed socks, both outmoded articles. I said, branch out. If you can knit a tea cosy, you can knit skiing hats. She said, oh, all right, I will. I said, anyway, you do know Joy because you said she had shocking eyebrows. She said, oh, I hope you didn't tell her that. I said, of course I didn't. And that's the way she is. She doesn't remember. So there's this little fella leaning over her saying, hello, remember me? And I say, no, she won't. Come on, mother, let's get you up. Only she says, oh, remember you? Of course I remember you. It's Frank Turnbull. It must be 50 years. He says, 52. Filing 1934. She says, see, Crest? He says, no sand in the bedrooms, and they both cracked out laughing. He had on these bright yellow gloves. Could have been a bookie. Meanwhile, she's still stuck on the pavement. So, eventually, I put my arms round her waist and hoist her up. And of course, his lordship's no help. Claims he has a bad back. Eventually, when I restore her to the perpendicular, she introduces him. Oh, this is Frank Turnbull. He's a friend of mine from the old days. I thought, what old days? I never knew anything about any old days. Turns out, he's a gentleman's outfitter, semi-retired. Shop in Bradford and some sort of outlet in Morecambe. I thought, well, that accounts for the gloves. Straight away, he takes charge. He says, right, Vera, what you need now is a cup of coffee. I said, we were just going for some tea, weren't we, Mother? Vera? Her name's not Vera. Nobody calls her Vera. I've never heard her being called Vera. My dad never called her Vera, except the once, when they were wheeling him down to the theatre. Right, he says, follow me. He puts his arm through hers. She says, careful, you might make my boyfriend jealous. I didn't say anything. Now, the cafe we normally patronise is just that little bit different. It's plain, but it's classy. There's no cloths on the tables, and the menu comes on a nice little slate. And all the waitresses wear their own clothes, so it looks as if they're just there for the fun of it. And all the stuff is homemade, and we're both big fans of the Data walnut bread. I said, this is the place. Mr. Turnbull goes straight past. No, he says, I know somewhere that's just opened. Follow me. Now, if there's one thing that Mother and I do agree on, is that red is a very common colour. The whole place is done out in red. The waitress is in red, the lampshades are in red, the plates are red. And on the table, there are those plastic things done up to look like tomatoes, also in red. I look round, and there's a chip in the sugar. I said, oh, Mother won't like this. Only she says, oh, this is colourful as the Graham. I said, there's a chip in the sugar. He says, details. They're still having their teething troubles. 3 coffees, is it? I said, no, we like tea. Only Mother says, no, I feel like an adventure. I'll have a coffee. He grabs a menu and puts his hand on hers. He says, might I suggest a cheeseburger? She says, oh, what's that? He says, it's best beef, mingled with golden fried onions, topped off with melted cheese, served with French fries and a lemon wedge. Oh, a lemon wedge, says Mother. That sounds nice. And I thought, well, I hope she can keep it down, because otherwise it'd be the pizza story all over again. One mouthful, and at 4 in the morning, I'm still stuck at the bedside with a bucket. She says, I like new experiences in eating. I tried a pizza once, didn't I, Graham? I never said anything. They fetch the food and she's weighing in. He says, are you enjoying your cheeseburger? She said, oh, yes, I am. Would I be mistaken in thinking that those are for tomato sauce? He said, yes, they are. She said, oh, give us a squirt. And they both burst out laughing. He says, glass cups, Graham. Be careful, we can see right up your nose. More laughter. She says, Graham's quite refined, aren't you, Graham? He often has a sherry. Mr. Turnbull says, well, he wants to tidy himself up a bit. Plastic back. He wants to get one of those quilted jobs. I've shifted quite a lot of those. I don't like those quilted jobs, I said. He sweats, said Mother. Oh, well, there's no excuse for that in this day and age, Mr. Turnbull said. You want to invest in some roll-on deodorant. Everybody could hear. And flares are an enigma, even in Bradford. Oh, he doesn't care, do you, Graham, Mother said. He reads a lot. So what, Mr. Turnbull said. I know plenty of big readers, and they still manage to look like men about town. Lovett green is a nice shade. I'll tell you this, Graham, if I was escorting a young lady around town, you wouldn't see me doing it in my grey socks and sandals. These shoes are Italian. Oh, I've always thought, Mother said, Graham would make a nice parson. Only he doesn't believe in God. Oh, that's no handicap nowadays, Mr. Turnbull said. What do you do? Oh, he's in between jobs at present, Mother said. He used to make soft toys for handicapped children, and now he makes paper flowers. I went to the toilet. When I came back, he said, I don't believe in mental health. I didn't say anything. Mother said, yes, well, I think the pendulum's gone too far. He said, it's like these girls not eating. They'd soon eat if they were brought up like us, Vera, with no food. She said, yes, well, I think they've had it too easy. She said, did you marry? Twice, he said. I buried my Amy last May. I was heartbroken. I've got a son who lives down south, and 2 grandsons, one at the motorbike stage. Do you drive? No, I said. You do, Mother said. You have that scooter. I said, it's only a moped, Mother. She said, moped, scooter, it's all the same. I can never get him to blow his own trumpet. Mr. Turnbull said, I drive a Rover 2000. It handles like a dream. I think the secret to mental illness is hard physical work. Making raffia mats all day, I'd go mad. Oh, but they do some nice ashtrays and a nice bit of pottery. And I've also seen some nice feather bedding, Mother said. Mr. Turnbull said, what do you think of these Pakistanis? Oh, in moderation, Mother said. We have a very nice news agent. Graham thinks we're all the same. I said, I thought you did. She said, well, I do when you explain it all to me, Graham. But then I forget the explanation and I'm back to square one. No explanation needed, Mr. Turnbull says. They're selling mangoes in our post office. What explanation is there for that? I know, Mother said. I've smelt curry on my woman's own. You have to be educated to understand it. I never said a word. He ran us home and promised to give her a call next time he was in the neighbourhood. Said he was often around here, trying to track down two-tone cardigans. Your mother's a grand woman, he said. You want to treasure her? Oh, he does, Mother said. He does. You're my boyfriend, aren't you, Graham? She put her arm through mine. Now, there must have been a famine going on somewhere, because we were just letting our midday meal go down when the vicar calls round with some envelopes, rushes in, and a rack and running shoes, and says, "Hello, Mrs. Whittaker. I really look forward to coming to this house." He's got the idea that she's deaf, but she's not. It's one of the few things that she isn't. He says, "Do you know why? Because you two remind me of Jesus and his mother." Well, I've always thought that Jesus would be quite offhand with his mother. And on one occasion, he was more than rude, quite snooty with her. But I never said anything. Of course, Madam was over the moon. In her book, if you can't be compared to the Queen Mother, then the Virgin Mary is the next best thing. She says, "Are you married?" Always asks him the same thing. Never remembers. He says, oh no, Mrs. Whittaker, I am married to God." She says, "Well, where does that leave you with the housework?" He said, "Oh, well, I don't do as well as your Graham. He has this place looking like a palace." She says, "Well, I do my whack. I washed 4 pairs of stockings this morning." She hadn't. She put them in the bowl and they slipped her mind. So the rest of the operation revolved around me. He says, "How are you today, Mrs. Whittaker?" "Oh, I'm a bit painful down the one side," she said. I said, "She had a fall yesterday." She said, "I never did." I said, "Yes, you did, Mother. You had a fall and we bumped into Mr. Turnbull." She said, "Oh, that's right, I did," and starts rooting in her handbag for a lipstick. That's one of those Anoraki things, isn't it? "They're out now, those," she said. "What you want to be a real man about town is one of those continental quilts." He said, "Oh." I said, "What she means is one of those quilted jackets." She said, "He knows perfectly well what I mean. Where did you get those shoes?" "Oh, they are training shoes," he said. "Training? Training for what?" said Mother. "Are you not fully qualified?" Oh no, Mrs. Whittaker. I believe if Jesus was alive today, these are the kind of shoes he'd be wearing. "Not if his mother had anything to do with it," she said. "She'd have him straight down to Steed and Simpson and get him a good pair of brogues. Somebody was telling me that Italians make good shoes." The vicar takes this as his cue to start telling us all about people who have no shoes at all, and after that via the famine in Ethiopia. So I fork out 50p, which she says will feed a family of 6 for a week. She says, well, I could have bought some Quality Street. When we get to the door, he says, I take my hat off to you, Graham. I've got a mother myself. When I get back in, she says, Vicar, how can you call him a vicar? How can you look up to someone who wears pumps? Just then, there's a knock on the door. She says, get down, he's back. Only, it wasn't. It was Mr. Turnbull. New outfit this time. Little shorty jacket, corduroy collar, maroon trousers. She says, oh, you look colourful. He says, well, we just happen to have these slacks on offer. I was just wondering whether you fancied a run out to Bolton Abbey. Oh, Bolton Abbey, said Mother. Oh, that's right up our street, isn't it, Graham? Graham's very good with old buildings, aren't you, Graham? He knows all the different names of the periods. And there's one period that's just come out. Other people don't like it, but we do, don't we, Graham? What is it? I said, I don't know. She said, you do know, Graham. What is it? I said, Victorian. She said, that's it, Victorian. Only they're knocking a lot of them down. Mr. Turnbull yawned. He said, I've got a nice bungalow. She said, oh, I'd like a nice bungalow, don't you, Graham? I said, yes, as long as it's not a blot on the landscape. She said, he said, well, mine's architect designed. It has a patio and overlooks a beauty spot. Oh, that sounds tip-top, says Mother. We better get our skates on. He says, well, I've got to drop off a load of green 3/4 length windbreakers at Ilkley, so I'm not sure there'll be enough room for a fourth party. Is there anything on at the pictures? She says, oh, he'll be all right reading, won't you, Graham? Anyway, Mr. Turnbull says, you don't always want to be round your mother at your age, do you, Graham? I didn't say anything. I was sat on my bed, reading one of my magazines, when I had a feeling that somebody was looking at the house. I couldn't see anybody, but once or twice I thought I heard somebody knocking on the door. But I never went down, in case there was nobody there. The next day, they went over to York. It was after 7 when he dropped her off. He generally comes in, but not this time. He just gives her a little kiss. She has to bend down. I said, did you have a nice time? She said, oh yes, we did. We had egg and chips, tea and bread and butter, and we've got a lot in common. And there's just a brand new shopping centre opened in Bradford, and that's going to be next on our agenda. She said, you look quiet. I said, do you wonder? Dr. Chowdhury said to me, I needed a peaceful environment. This is hardly a peaceful environment with all your fancy men coming in and out every 5 minutes. She said, he's not my fancy man. I said, well, he is all but your fancy man in embryo. She said, I don't know what that means. I said, how old are you? She said, I don't know. I said, you do know. She said, I don't know. Tell me. I said, 72. She said, well, that's not old. How old was Winston Churchill? I said, when? She said, you think you've got it over me, Graham Whittaker. Well, I tell you something. I've got it over you because I was talking to Frank and he was telling me all about the economy and he reckons you've got it all wrong. I said, how? She said, oh, I don't remember, but you have. He said, it was wrong to blame it on the government. It's the blacks. I didn't say anything and went straight upstairs. When I came back down, she was still sitting on the stairs wearing a hat and coat. I said, do you want to make him a tea cosy? She said, well, I don't really think he's a tea cosy type because when I first knew him, he had a motorbike and sidecar. Besides, I think we've gone way beyond the tea cosy stage. I said, what does that mean? She said, Graham, my one aim in life is to make you happy. And if I thought that by me dying would make you happy, then I would. I said, brother, you dying would not make me happy. It would make me very unhappy. Anyway, you're not going to die. She said, no, I'm not going to die. I'm getting married and the honeymoon's going to be in Tenerife. She went to make some tea. I said, how can you go to Tenerife? You get smothered in Scarborough. She said, oh, it's a 4-star hotel, tip-top air conditioning, and your dinner gets laid out on a long table. I said, what about your bells? She said, what about my bells? I said, well, you said they were unpredictable in Morecambe. Get them all the way to the Canary Islands and they'll be all over the place. She said, who mentioned anything about the Canary Islands? I'm going to Tenerife. I said, what about post-Tenerife? Where are you going to live? She said, here. Frank's going to be away a lot on business, but he'd like to call this home. I said, Mother, what about me? She went into the kitchen. Well, we were wondering whether you wouldn't rather move back to the hostel. You were happy at the hostel. You mixed with all sorts. I said, Mother, this is my home. She said, a man shouldn't be living with his mother at your age. Frank said, take a tablet. Now, it's 4 a.m. and I can't sleep. I can see a car parked outside and I think somebody's in it, watching. I'm not sure, but it's just like before. I thought all that chapter had changed. The next day, I went to community caring down at the health centre. It caters for all sorts. Steve, who runs it, said he's dead against what he calls a ghetto approach. What he's after is a nice mix aspects of personality difficulties as being a fruitful exercise in problem solving and a more realistic model of society in general. There's a constant flow of coffee oiling the wheels, as Steve calls it, and we're all encouraged to ventilate our problems and generally let our hair down. I sometimes feel a bit out of it, as I don't have any particular problems. But this time, when Steve says, "Right, now, lads and lasses, who is going to get the ball rolling?" I get in quick and tell them all about Mother and Mr. Turnbull. And when I've finished, Steve says, "Thank you, Graham, for sharing your problem with us. Who would like to kick it around?" First off the mark is Leonard, who wonders whether Graham has sufficiently appreciated that older people can have meaningful relationships as well as young people. This is not unsurprising coming from Leonard, as he is 65, but he doesn't have meaningful relationships. He's just been had up for exposing himself at Sainsbury's doorway. As Mother says, Tesco's, you could understand it. And then Janice chips in, "Have they been having sexual intercourse?" I said, "I don't know, I don't really want to think about it." And Steve says, "Why?" I said, "I don't know." He says, "Well, maybe what we should be talking about is why Graham is being so defensive about sexual intercourse." I said, "Look, Steve, I'm not being defensive about sexual intercourse. She's my mother." And then Jackie, who's 9 parts lesbian, says, "Graham, but she is a woman." I said, "I don't believe this, Jackie. You said you were against marriage." She said, "I'm not against a caring marriage, Graham." I said, "This isn't a caring marriage, Jackie." She said, "Well, what's Tenerife? All I got was a black eye and a day trip to Fleetwood." Then they all have a go. "Let's get Graham." And Steve sums it up. "The general feeling of the group is that Graham could learn to be more open." I said, "How can I be more open when there's somebody outside watching the house?" I wanted to discuss this. Only Leonard leaps in and says he feels the need to talk through an episode that happened behind British Home Stores. I stuck it out a bit longer and then I came home. Mum sat there, all dolled up, earrings on, chiffon scarf, lathered in makeup. She says, "Oh, I thought you were Mr. Turnbull." I said, "No." She said, "I'll just go to the lab." She goes there 3 times in the next 10 minutes. I said, "You're not getting married today, are you?" She said, "Oh no, there's an Asda supermarket opened and we're just going to give it the once over in Bingley." I said, "Mother, somebody is looking at the house." She said, "What I'm looking for is some tissues, and Frank needs a little chamois for his window screen." Just then, there was a toot on the horn. She runs off to the lab again. I said, "Don't go. Ma'am, don't leave me." She said, "I'm not going to be bullied by you. You're a grown man." She said, "Read one of your magazines. Make yourself a poached egg." There was another toot on the horn. I said, "Ma'am," she said, I'm one of those two vests and take a tablet. Give us a kiss. Toodle pip." I thought, well, I'll go and sit in the back room where no one can see me. I'll pull the curtains and I'm sitting on my own in the dark when I hear a knock on the door. I pretend it's not happening, just as Dr. Chowdhury told me to, but then I hear it again, getting louder, and then somebody shouts through the letterbox, "I know you're there! Open the door!" So I do. It's a woman. She said, "Are you the son?" I said, "What?" She said, "Are you the son? I'm the daughter." I said, "Have you been watching the house?" She said, "On and off." I said, "Why?" She said, "Nothing." She said, "I don't know what there is to be so bothered about." I said, "Well, you better come in." It was after 9 o'clock when I heard the car park outside. I said, "Hello, I've had a nice time." She said, "Oh, yes, I did, thank you." I said, "Did you get your suntan lotion?" She said, "What suntan lotion?" I said, "You were going to get some suntan lotion." She said, "Oh." I said, "Never mind, you've forgotten. How's Mr. Turnbull?" I said. She said, "Oh, he's all right," and takes her things off. She said, "I think you'd like him, Graham, if you got to know him." I said, "Well, you better bring him in next time." She said, "Well, maybe I will. It would be nice if we could occasionally go out as a threesome." "So what have you been doing?" she said. I said, "Nothing. I just sat here." She said, "But you've been all right, hmm?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "See, there wasn't anybody outside the house." I said, "Oh, yes, there was." She said, "Oh, Graham, take a tablet." I said, "I don't want a tablet." She said, "Oh, Graham, take a tablet." I said, "I'm telling you, there was who was outside the house. It was Mrs. Pamela Musgrove." She said, "Who's she?" I said, She's the daughter of your hobby to be." She said, "He hasn't got an hobby. He's got a son who lives down south." She said, you're having me on." I said, "He has a daughter." She said, "I'm going to the lab." I said, "There's something else. Mrs. Turnbull." She shouted, "There isn't a Mrs. Turnbull. She's dead." I said, "She's not dead. She's in a wheelchair with a broken heart. He's been leading you on." She comes back out. She said, "You're just making this up." I said, "I'm not making it up. The number's on the pad." I said, "He's been doing this lots of times. You're not the first. There was one woman who thought she was going to the Bahamas. You were spotted by a well-wisher at Bolton Abbey, Tenerife." Later on, I went up with a cup of tea. She'd been crying. She said, "I bought this little bed jacket." I said, "I know, Mum. I'm sorry, Mum." She said, He wasn't much, but what was I supposed to do at my age? I mean, how old am I? I said, 72. She said, see, I could remember with him. I can't remember with you. I said, I'm sorry, ma'am. She said, you're not sorry. You didn't even like him. I said, he wasn't good enough for you, mum. She said, I'll be the best judge of that. She said, he was natty, which is more than I can say for you. I said, I'm really sorry, mum. She said, how can you understand? How can you be sorry? You're not even normal. I said, I'm off to bed. A few hours later, she comes shouting at my door. You think you've got it over me, Graham Whittaker. Well, I have got it over you because I know what kind of magazines you read. I said, they're chest. She said, they're not chest. They're nothing to do with chest. Chest for men. Chest with no clothes on. Men in their birthday suits. That kind of chest. I said, go back to bed and turn your blanket off. The next day, she was right as rain. Never even mentioned it. Except when we were leaving the house. She said, he had a hearing aid. Where are we going today? I said, well, I thought we'd try a little trip out to Ripon. She said, oh, that's nice. We could go to visit the cathedral. We like old buildings, don't we? Me and you. And she put her arm through mine.